Nobody on the internet yelling at us, telling us how to build our armies. No queues on the internet to sit through to buy overpriced miniatures. Why haven't I broken this sooner? There goes nothing. Hey there folks, so I just wanted to talk about why Warhammer the Old World seems to be doing a lot better than most people expected it to do. To start, this is Grimgor Ironhide, one of the only painted models that I still have from when I first got into the hobby. My father actually bought him for me about 25 years ago or so on our first trip to a games workshop. Now this is another Grimgor Ironhide that I bought more recently. There's good reason why Grimgor has me thinking now about spending money on old sculpts that I probably could have bought off of eBay for like half to 75% of the price like a year ago. And that reason is nostalgia. It's one hell of a drug. Now, when Old World was first announced, I was kind of uninterested in it. In fact, I was probably completely disinterested in it because my thought process was, you know, I painted these models 25 years ago. Why would I pick them up now, especially when GW's current line of miniatures is, I mean, let's be honest, leagues beyond their older stuff that they were making like 30 years ago. That's not to say that the older stuff isn't good quality or interesting to look at. It's just the technology has advanced quite a bit and the current miniatures are just a lot better, especially when they're not covered in just a ton of unnecessary details. I'm sorry, GW, I don't want to paint like 12 pouches, 6 belts, and like 7 chains per miniature. It's just not something I'm into. Maybe you guys are, but not for me. Now, Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition, Fantasy's last edition, released in 2010 and was summarily replaced by Age of Sigmar in 2015. A lot of people suspect this happened because the game just wasn't doing that well, it wasn't very popular, it wasn't bringing in a lot of money, especially compared to Warhammer 40k, a plethora of reasons why, especially the big one, which people were jumping on, which was the fact that GW was trying to make sure that everything they produced could be trademarked, copywritten, whatever, I'm no lawyer, but essentially they wanted to own the rights to whatever we're selling. And it's kind of hard to just copyright dwarf or elf or orc or whatever, these Tolkienian things that have been around for such a long time. So high elves became moo cow elves, the dwarf slayer unit became an entire faction of always shirtless dwarves, orcs became aurochs, and wood elves became trees. Wood elves are just trees now, I guess. Now, as you can imagine or experienced, there was a lot of frustration with the torch that was held by Warhammer Fantasy for 30 plus years just being passed on to this new, strange, weirdness for weirdness sake world. But by the time the frustration and backlash died down, Sigmar seemed to actually do quite well. It just seems to be a lot more popular. There's a lot more people playing. There seems to be a lot more product selling. It just seems to be better off than Warhammer Fantasy ever was, at least in its final days. And yet, here we are, back to the old world. Back to the world of whippy sticks and metal miniatures, back to the world of fiddling around with unit rankings, trying to get them to fit just right, back to a world of goblin green base rims. The cities of Sigmar just had their range beautifully updated like 6 months ago, but now the Empire is back and their chonky fists are here to reign. Now, to many, what I just said may seem very negative, but to others, the idea of whippy sticks, goblin green, and metal miniatures brings on both excitement, and I'm going to use that word again, nostalgia. Nostalgia can be a huge driver for some people, and that's why for me, if my studio was on fire right now, and I could only save one thing, it would most likely be Mr. Grimgor Ironhide. It has that history, those memories, and that nostalgia. Now, hey, while I'm talking about it, let me know what your first miniature was. What mini for you brings you back to an earlier point in time in your life? Let me know down below. I think it would be kind of cool to hear some of those stories from people. Now, I've actually sold a lot of my miniatures over the years, which I think is somewhat common in this hobby. And it's usually because of moving and needing to make some space or trying to fund a cooler at the time army. Whatever the reason, I regret selling most of those miniatures. And it's not because I want to play whatever army those miniatures are for, or because I want to collect all the things. It's the same reason that I kept Grimgor all of these years. I don't cherish the flimsy foam rock that his giant metal ass is standing on, causing him to fall over all the time, and I don't care about his smudged highlighter yellow eyes that are blinding to stare into. It's all about the memories that Grimgor evokes, the same kinds of memories from those other miniatures that were painted right over or stripped completely unknowingly by strangers that I pawned them off to. Now I think this is a large part of the reason why the old world has done so well, despite any flaws that it may or may not have. It gives a lot of people the opportunity to travel back in time in a way, to a point in their lives that they thought they'd never be able to return to. Now when the Old World release date finally came and Orcs and Goblins, my first and primary fantasy army, were not readily available right away, my interest kind of faded away with that. I didn't really care about the game, I cared about those memories that came with it. And yet, shortly after the release date, there was a sneak peek of what the future held, and lo and behold, a giant box of Orcs and Goblins, along with some awesome returning resin and metal miniatures, and even 2 new miniatures, a Black Orc Warboss and an Orc Shaman. Now most of all, what got me hyped were those beautiful, doe-eyed, stupid stone trolls. I've been obsessed with those miniatures for forever, but I've never gotten my hands on them. I was all about them when I was a kid, but the local hobby store that we had, the only one, didn't really have a ton of Warhammer stuff. The closest Games Workshop was like forever away. And there was no online store at the time, at least that I'm aware of. I was a kid, so whatever. But my channel logo, that little guy, he's based on the stone trolls. I want to paint a stone troll, frickin' gimme. Thank you. But for now, I just have to bide my time and wait for these new old miniatures to be re-released. I paint this Grimgor and I'm reminded of a time where I didn't have a mortgage to pay, I didn't have a job to go to, or I didn't have a car that was always breaking down at the most inconvenient of times. I remember discovering this world of fantasy for the first time, drooling over magazines full of heroes and villains and strange creatures and goblin green bases. It brings back memories of going to games day for the first time with my father and just being completely enthralled by everything. I remember being a kid and shoving my nose into White Dwarf magazines, painting miniatures terribly one after another, building scratch terrain best I could out of whatever I could find just to deal with my parents' separation at the time, which for me was kind of hard to deal with as a kid. Didn't really understand it, and this was all just a way for me to escape, and that all came from Warhammer. I often think about the first miniatures I ever had, a metal high elf command group given to me by my grandfather. He passed away just over a year ago or so, and if I still had those, they would definitely deserve a high shelf in my display cabinet. When I think back on going to a Games Workshop as a kid with my father and winning a raffle, I won a giant Orcs and Goblins box, super sweet. I don't remember assembling any of those miniatures or even painting any of them, except for one, which I painted with my mother in the basement of our old house. She probably doesn't remember this, but for me, it's a fond memory. Now, my friend Colin actually got me into Warhammer 40k years ago when I traded some of my fantasy stuff for his metal Eldar army. Do I still have any of those miniatures? No, because I am but a big, stupid man. However, I do remember clearly sitting in the back of my dad's house, huddled around a small little desk, each of us painting a Farseer. Now, do I also remember trying to get the metal Wraith Lord's arms to stay on for the 57th time, only for the super glue to snap and ruin my paint job, and then I have to start all over again? Yes, I absolutely remember that, but if I talk about it anymore, I'm gonna froth with rage, so moving on. The point I'm trying to make here is that sometimes your old miniatures matter, and they matter in more ways than the plastic or the metal or the paint. Now, I can't tell you if Old World is a good game or a bad one because I haven't played it, but I don't think it matters if the miniatures stand up to the more modern ones, because those derpy but amazing and classic miniatures hold enough value for those of us that were first exploring Warhammer Fantasy many years ago, because it takes us back to a time where we were just completely thrown into this world of painting and gaming and lore, transports us back to another point in time in our lives, all the while life was rushing us off to where we are now. But hey, maybe Old World is an amazing game, and a lot of those older miniatures do have timeless aesthetics that happen to stand up to some of the more modern miniatures, for sure. But I don't think a healthy dose of nostalgia is going to hurt anything, and in fact, I think it's probably helping a fair bit. Thanks for watching, folks. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of Old World down below. What's your favorite part? The world, the miniatures, the game? I'm looking to jump in soon, if not just to paint those amazing stone trolls. I freaking love those guys. They're awesome. Anyways, until next time, paint today for better tomorrow. Peace out.